What happens when a man, pushed to his absolute limit, decides he has nothing left to lose? What happens when that man is a master welder, and he spends a secret year and a half turning his 60-ton bulldozer into an unstoppable tank? You are about to witness the true story of the most destructive, most unbelievable rampage in modern American history. A story so cinematic, it feels like fiction. This wasn't a chase. This was a one-man lore. Our story begins in the small, quiet mountain town of Granby, Colorado. A town surrounded by beautiful scenery, a place where everyone knows everyone. And in that town, lived a man named Marvin Heemeyer. At 52 years old, Marv was known as one of the best muffler repairmen in the state. He was a skilled welder, an expert with machines. He was a quiet, private man, who mostly kept to himself. But beneath that quiet surface, a storm of frustration and perceived injustice was brewing. A storm that would eventually consume him and his town. The conflict, like many small-town disputes, started simply. It was a fight over land. Heemeyer owned a small 2-acre plot where he ran his muffler repair shop. He had legally purchased it years earlier. A few years later, a large concrete company bought the land next to his. Soon, they announced plans to build a massive concrete plant. This new plant would completely cut off the only access road to Marv's shop. For him, it was a business death sentence. Heemeyer tried to fight it the right way. He gathered signatures for a petition. He went to the town's zoning commission meetings, pleading his case. He even scraped together his life savings, nearly $500,000, to hire lawyers and file appeals. He felt he was being reasonable, but at every single turn, he was shut down. The town council approved the concrete plant. He felt the system, the very community he was a part of, was corrupt and conspiring against him. In a series of secret audio tapes he recorded in the months leading up to his rampage, he detailed his mindset. His voice is calm, but the anger is clear. He said, quote, "I was always willing to be reasonable, until I had to be unreasonable. Sometimes reasonable men must do unreasonable things." He truly believed he was a patriot, standing up to a corrupt system that had pushed him too far. With all legal options exhausted, Marvin Heemeyer decided that if he couldn't find justice, he would deliver revenge. He sold his property to a scrap company. He told his friends and the few family he had that he was moving out of state. He packed up his things, and for all intents and purposes, he vanished. But Marvin Heemeyer didn't leave town. He secretly moved into the dark, cold workshop he had just sold, and for 18 months, surrounded by the tools of his trade, he began his final project. His canvas was a Komatsu D355, a bulldozer, a 63-ton beast of yellow steel. But what he built upon it was something else entirely. This wasn't just a welding job. This was a work of meticulous, paranoid, military-grade engineering. Let's break down the machine that would become known as the Killdozer. Heemeyer started with the armor. He created his own composite armor, a technique used in modern battle tanks. He took thick, half-inch plates of high-strength steel and welded them to the cabin, the engine, and the treads. But then, he poured a custom mix of high-strength concrete over a foot thick, in between the steel plates. The result was an impenetrable shell, resistant to small arms fire, and even powerful enough to withstand explosions from law enforcement. To see, he couldn't use windows. They would be a weak point. So, he installed multiple video cameras on the outside, each encased in a 3-inch thick box of bulletproof plastic. He knew the cameras could be blinded by dust and debris from the destruction he planned. His solution was ingenious. Each camera was fitted with a compressed air nozzle, which he could operate from inside the cabin, allowing him to blast the lenses clean at the push of a button. The cabin itself was an airtight tube. He had sealed himself inside with no way out. For offense, he installed 3 firing ports, 1 on the front and 2 on the sides, for 3 different rifles. A powerful .50 caliber Barrett M82 semi-automatic rifle, capable of disabling an engine block, a .308 caliber semi-automatic rifle, and a .22 caliber rifle. Inside his steel coffin, he had an air conditioning unit, food, water, and everything he needed to survive a long siege. On June 4, 2004, after a year and a half of secret work, his creation was complete, and Marvin Heemeyer was ready to go to war with the town of Granby. At precisely 2:15 p.m., the rampage began. Heemeyer fired up the 410 horsepower diesel engine and drove his 60-ton creation straight through the metal wall of his own workshop. His first target was the source of his rage, the Mountain Park concrete plant. He spent the first 15 minutes of his rampage systematically demolishing it. He didn't just knock down a wall. He flattened building after building, as if erasing it from existence. The first police officer to arrive on the scene was a local undersheriff. What he saw was unbelievable. He radioed in, his voice filled with a mix of panic and disbelief, describing a tank tearing apart the concrete plant. More officers arrived. They were completely, hopelessly, outgunned. Their 9mm pistols and shotguns were like pea shooters against a battleship. The bullets simply sparked and ricocheted off the thick armor. The officers were forced to retreat and watch, helpless. After leveling the concrete plant, Heemeyer turned his machine towards the town itself. This was not random chaos. His path of destruction was a pre-planned, personal hit list. His next target, the Granby Town Hall. To Marv, this building was the symbol of the corrupt government that had failed him. He drove his 60-ton tank through the front doors and methodically tore the building apart, room by room. The police could do nothing but watch. The 911 call center was in chaos, flooded with calls from terrified citizens. On the ground, the officers became increasingly desperate. They tried to block his path with their patrol cars. He simply flattened them like soda cans. The town brought in its largest piece of equipment, a massive Caterpillar scraper, to try and fight the Killdozer head-on. The two giant machines battled, a clash of steel and horsepower, but the scraper was no match for Heemeyer's superior armor and power. It was pushed aside, defeated. The state police SWAT team arrived, armed with .50 caliber rifles. They climbed onto rooftops, trying to find a weak spot. They fired hundreds of rounds. Nothing. The machine kept moving. His hit list continued. He destroyed the office of the local newspaper that had published editorials against him. He destroyed the home of the former mayor. He destroyed the bank that had financed the concrete plant. He was on a mission, a methodical quest to wipe out every person in business he believed had wronged him. For 2 hours and 7 minutes, Marvin Heemeyer held an entire town hostage. He was an unstoppable force, a real-life monster movie come to life. The governor of Colorado considered authorizing the National Guard to use an Apache helicopter armed with a Hellfire missile, an anti-tank weapon. But the risk of collateral damage in a civilian town was too great. The police were trying to find a weakness, any weakness at all. But Heemeyer had thought of everything. Or so he thought. As the rampage continued, the Killdozer itself was starting to suffer. Not from the outside, but from the inside. The engine was overheating from the constant strain, and radiator fluid was leaking, leaving a trail behind the machine. He had destroyed 13 buildings, causing over $7 million in damages. He knew his time was running out. He set his sights on his final target, a local hardware store. As he plowed through the building's front wall, something finally went wrong. Something Heemeyer hadn't planned for. The sheer weight of the bulldozer, combined with the structural damage, caused the building's floor to collapse. The front of the massive machine fell into the store's shallow basement. It was stuck. The engine roared, the treads churned uselessly, but it couldn't get traction. The unstoppable force was finally stopped. As the SWAT team cautiously surrounded the silent, wounded machine, a single, muffled gunshot was heard from inside the cabin. But the story wasn't over. Getting inside was almost as hard as stopping it. The police couldn't just open a door. They had to become a demolition crew. It took a specialized heavy equipment team 12 agonizing hours, using industrial cutting torches and a 100-ton crane, to finally breach the steel and concrete armor. Inside, they found Marvin Heemeyer. He had taken his own life with a handgun. He was the only casualty in his 2-hour war. In the end, was it genius or was it madness? The engineering of the Killdozer was undeniably brilliant. A masterpiece of armor and design, built in total secrecy with incredible skill. But it was genius in the service of a dark, all-consuming, and self-destructive revenge. In the aftermath, Heemeyer's story exploded online. He became an internet legend. To some, he is a modern folk hero, the last great American rebel who stood up against a corrupt system that pushed him too far. They create memes, t-shirts, and even write songs about his one-man war. To others, especially the people of Granby whose lives and businesses he shattered, he is nothing more than a domestic terrorist. A man so consumed by his own anger that he was willing to destroy an entire town. He created a machine he couldn't be stopped in, and a coffin he couldn't escape from. A truly unbelievable story of when a man decides to build a monster. What do you think? Was Marvin Heemeyer a misunderstood hero, or just a destructive madman? Let us know in the comments. And for more deep dive breakdowns of the world's most unbelievable cases, make sure to subscribe to Chase Matrix. Thanks for watching.